With O'Neill, we're going to do the vac motor service. The tools required are pretty basic. 13 millimeter socket or wrench. You can use a drill driver if you want. Some kind of a straight screwdriver for prying. Phillips screwdriver for removing 4 screws. I'm going to go ahead and raise the lid. The vac is mounted on this plate. It has 4 bolts holding it to the upper lid assembly. We're going to remove those 4 bolts. Just set those aside, make sure you're careful they don't fall down in the tank on you. After that 4th one, this whole plate is loose. You can lower the kickstand and just let it lay down flat on the tank. There's your vac motor. If your vac motor sounds good, it just needs to have the carbon brushes serviced. We're going to remove the gasket, set that aside. I want to remove this plastic fan cowling. It has 2 metal tabs, 1 on each side, and 4 plastic tabs. A little tooth on each end. Just going to use a straight screwdriver to pry those teeth out. Get the metal tab back, bend it back, and then raise one side off. Repeat on the other side. Just keep a little pressure as you pry them loose and they'll pop right off of there. The other side can be a little bit difficult, but if you come in from the back, the same pressure, make sure the metal tab is loose. It'll work its way loose. If you break one of the teeth, it's not a big deal. Definitely be careful to not bend the fan blades. Rather sensitive. Now we're going to release the carbon brush. We're going to pull these 4 screws, 1, 2, and on the other side, the opposite end, you have the same carbon brush. We're going to repeat the same process. The retaining clip is out, carbon brush is loose. You just pull that right on out of there. If you notice, plenty of meat, springy, just like it should be. If you want, you can hit that with an air compressor, but that brush is confirmed good. It's ready to go. While you have it out, you can look at the copper of the motor. Each segment between each piece of copper needs to be clear of any carbon buildup. If there were buildup, you could blow it out with an air compressor, electrical contact cleaner, or a razor blade. Just give it a scrape in between each segment, clearing the carbon out. So each one is independent. Work your way around. You can just spin it a little bit of pressure will get that turning. And there you go. This brush can be reinstalled. Just going to set it back in place and put a clip back on. Hold a little pressure on it. Clip sits right over the carbon brush, holds it in place. Put your 2 screws back in, nice and snug. Don't need a tremendous amount of torque. Repeat the process on the other side. Reinstall your plastic cowling. Reinstall the gasket. Flip the motor plate up. Mount the 4 bolts. Your motor's been serviced. If your carbon brushes are worn or need service, they're sticky, they're not springing back, remove the 4 screws around the housing. 4 little Phillips head screws. Just like that right there. The motor will slide out. remove the hose. The motor will be loose. Needs service on the carbon brushes. They're sticky, they're worn down, they're not springing back. We're gonna go ahead and do a removal. There's 4 Phillips head screws that just pop right off of this plate. They look like that right there. Back those out. The motor just slips right out of there. You can take the hose off the end, stand the motor up. Then you've got 4 Phillips head screws you can pull off the carbon brush retainers. You've got a power drill to make things a little bit faster and easier. Just careful to not damage your fan blade or strip your screws out. If you're tightening, always be careful for cross threads. Once your carbon brushes are loose, you'll notice that one side goes directly to the wire harness through a couple connectors to the controller and has a lead that comes right in the top of it. The other side has that same lead, but you'll notice that that one goes down through the windings of the motor. So you can't just clip the cables and pull it out. You need to use your straight screwdriver for prying. And just work that lead right out of the top of the carbon brush assembly. You can take a flat of your screwdriver, turn it in there, give it a little twist. If you got a little wider screwdriver, you can do a little wiggling, a little twisting. It'll pop right out. If you notice, it's a flat plate with a little tooth on it. Slips right into that slot and locks on the plastic. Your carbon brush should have a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of meat on it. Should be nice and springy. Once you get both of the plates released and the carbon brush is out, if they're bad, you can replace them with new ones. Stick your new one in, pop the plate in the slot, screw it down with the clip, put your fan back together. Last thing you'll want to check is where the upper vac motor tank assembly comes down into the harness, to the machine, to the control board. The quick disconnect there very rarely can have some overheat issues where the connector is withdrawn and you have a poor connection, high amperage, high heat issue. You can usually feel this one. You'll feel a lot of residual heat when the vac motor is running if you have that problem. It's very easy to just snip this and bypass it with a jumper wire or a butt splice if you have enough slack. If you don't have enough slack, you're having trouble getting at it, you can remove 4 of these bolts, these top 2 here and the 2 right here. This whole plate will come off and you'll have a lot of slack in that harness. No problem at all with doing a butt splice or in the worst case, even wire nuts to put this together. Just make sure you have enough for this tank to move up and down so you're not constricted on that angle. Here's an example of some boards that have a good connection. If you notice, the metal inside is clean and shiny. Here's one with a dramatically burnt connection. You can see where the heat has caused the buildup of corrosion. It'd be very difficult to clean that connection and bring it back. Here's an internal view of what that connector looks like inside. You can see how you get heat buildup, corrosion, poor connection, more amp draw, more heat issues. Here's another version that's just starting. You can notice a little bit of the buildup there. This one could still be cleaned and brought back. Put back the wire about 1/4, 3/8 of an inch. Take your connector, just a 12 gauge butt splice. Make sure all the strands are together going forward. Put your splice on. Make sure it's seated well. There's a little stop internally that the wire should hit. Give it a good crimp. Your connectors on, give them a good yank, make sure that they're seated well. If they come off, cut, restrip, and do it again. If they stay on nice and secure, you're ready to attach to the machine. The connection replacement here on just an old machine. You notice this is a nice burnout back connector here. You see the heat progress down with corrosion, deteriorated the cable. So you want to cut out all of the bad cable and keep cutting until you don't see any more white or chalkiness on the copper. Once you see clean copper, you're good to go ahead and strip. You want to keep that same 3/8 1/4 inch strip. If the plastic's really hot and burnt on there, you might want to take a little bit more. Should come off pretty clean. Then you're ready to go ahead and put your butt splice on there. Splice up the brown wire the same way. Plug your new connector into the board. Make sure everything's nice and snug. Put the shell back on. Put the seat back on, you're ready to go.